For a lot of people, part of the cuisine scene in Europe is actually about drinking. I want to talk a little bit about wine, beer, spirits, and also, of course, that great cafe culture that you're going to find in Europe. Wine is a European staple, and there's kind of an expectation that everyone should have access to cheap table wine. And there are literally filling stations like this one all over Italy where you can go and just fill up jugs of good but basic table wine so that you can always have a little wine on the table with your family. There's sort of a half joke that you'll hear in Europe that it's cheaper to buy wine sometimes than it is to buy water, and that really is the case in a lot of restaurants. It's just a very important aspect. If you really want to go high end, of course, you can do that as well. There's some really refined wineries. There's some great opportunities to taste what the local vintners are doing and what they're sometimes experimenting with. There's a whole breed of super Tuscan wines, which has to do with Tuscan vintners who are mixing wines in an interesting way and creating really exciting blends. If you want to taste some wines in Europe, there's a few good opportunities. You can go to a wine bar. This is one of my favorite wine bars in the city of Dubrovnik in Croatia. You can learn a little bit about local wines. Often you'll have a bartender who understands that you're a visitor and you're just curious to learn about the wines, and they're happy to walk you through some of your options. And very often they serve some really nice food that's paired to go perfectly with that wine. There are also great wine shops where, again, somebody can help you, maybe give you different samples to help you kind of narrow in on exactly what kind of wine you're looking for. And a few bottles of wine for picnics while you're in Europe, or even shipping some bottles home, is a good investment if you're a wine lover. Of course, the ultimate experience if you're a wine lover in Europe is to go to a winery where you can actually see the facility where the wine is grown and created. Oftentimes, you can just go and take a tour where they'll actually walk you through the vineyards, and they'll walk you through their cellars and their operation, and you'll come to understand exactly where that wine came from. By the way, Europe doesn't really quite have the Napa Valley experience that we expect in the US, where you can just kind of drive around and drop into wineries as you like. For the most part, they really like you to call ahead. So if you're a wine lover, it's worth doing a little bit of homework, figuring out which wineries interest you. And it's really just a day or two ahead, give them a call and say, could I stop by sometime tomorrow for a tour? And very often, for a small price, they'll be happy to do that for you. One of my favorite things about going for wine tastings and touring vineyards in Europe is you get to meet the people who actually make the wines. This is a wonderful gentleman named Adamo who lives in Montepulciano, that beautiful Tuscan hill town. And he is evangelical about wine. I've never seen somebody speak so poetically about wine. It's his whole life. In fact, the last time I went to Montepulciano, I walked into Adamo's shop and I saw him there in his apron and I say, Adamo, how are you doing? He said, oh, Cameron. He says, it's wonderful. I retired, but they still let me come to work every day. Wine is his whole life, Adamo. It's fun to meet those people. Another tip for wine lovers, of course we know that French and Italian and Spanish wines are really top quality, but there are some really excellent wines in other parts of Europe that you might not think of immediately with wines, but it is worth kind of getting to know them. For example, in a lot of the former Eastern Europe, places like Croatia, Slovenia, Hungary, they didn't have very good wine a generation ago because under communism, a lot of the wine production was sort of consolidated and centralized. But these days, really talented vintners are going back to the traditional methods in these places, and you can get some really excellent wines in countries that you wouldn't expect to. Of course, another great aspect of European drinking culture is the beer culture. There's a lot of countries that are more known for their beer than for their wine. Of course, Germany is one of them. And again, it's fun to enjoy German beer, but beer in Germany is a whole social custom. It's not just about drinking the beer. It's about the experience of sharing it with friends and how you organize your life around it. In Germany, for example, especially down in Bavaria in southern Germany, you have lots of beautiful beer gardens, which are basically big picnic tables under chestnut trees. And it's sort of a self-service system. You have to kind of walk around, and each little kiosk sells something different. This is where you get the steckrelfish, which is a mackerel grilled on a spit over a rotisserie. If you want to get sausage, there's a little sausage kiosk. If you want to get a pretzel, there's a pretzel kiosk, and so forth. Beer is served by the Maß, ein Maß, or as we call it in English, ein Pitcher. You can try to order a half Maß if you'd like to. And this is a really memorable meal. Some white sausages from Munich, a big pretzel, some spiral cut radishes, and a big Maß of beer as a really memorable German thing. And it is a cultural thing as well. Again, it's a whole sort of social custom, not just an opportunity to eat and drink. Another country that's really known for its beer is Belgium. And Belgium has a very different approach to beer. It's less about quantity and more about quality. Belgian beers tend to be really high alcohol content. They also have a more artisanal approach to their beers. Every beer is designed in a very careful way. They kind of bring the French attention to crafting food, and they import it to the way of making beer. In fact, every Belgian beer has a very specific glass in which it is meant to be served. And if you go to a Belgian bar and they have a beer that you want, but they don't have the glass for that beer, they will not serve you the beer, because that beer can only be drunk from the glass it's designed to be drunk from. It's really fun as you travel around Europe, not just to enjoy the beer, but to come to appreciate these little aspects and details and nuances of the culture around the food. There are also some beautiful beer halls in Belgium, really fun places to try the beer. Great Britain, of course, is also a great country for beer. One thing I love about not just the beer, but again, the social custom around the beer, is it's sort of this spontaneous cocktail party that erupts after work in a big city every evening. Everyone who's on their way home from work will stop off at the neighborhood pub, and they don't have the laws that we do where you have to stay within the ropes, because British people love to just spill out all over the sidewalk. And one thing I love to do in Britain is wander around if I'm in London just as work is getting out and kind of float from pub to pub, and you'll see little pockets of people at each one. It's a very social experience. By the way, if you're a fan of craft beer here in the United States, you'll find it in Europe. That's becoming very popular there as well. Italy, of all places, which we think of as a wine country, has an excellent craft beer culture that's very similar to our craft beer culture. You can get a little flight of different kinds of beer and taste a variety of what the people there are doing. Another aspect of European drinking culture is spirits. And Europeans, I would say, have a more sophisticated and nuanced approach to spirits than we do. A lot of Europeans will begin a meal with an aperitif, a pre-dinner drink. A lot of them will finish a meal with a digestif, a post-dinner drink. And again, it's really fun to really dig into the culture of the different spirits of Europe. If you're in Scotland, you obviously have to try a dram of whiskey. You want to stop by a whiskey shop where they can do a little tasting and help you figure out whether you like your whiskey peaty or not, smoky or not. You can also go tour a whiskey distillery and see the place where all of this beautiful stuff is made. You could even go to a cooperage where they make the barrels to age the whiskey. Every country has its own firewater. Every country has its own hard drinks. In Poland, of course, it's vodka. In southern Italy, it's limoncello, that delicious lemon-flavored liqueur. In Turkey and Greece, they have ouzo, which is an anise-flavored drink that sort of turns cloudy when you add water to it. The Czech Republic has becherovka, which is a sort of almost like a Jägermeister. It's a really strong herbal blend. Hungary has their own version of that called unicum. And it's fun to see how popular and important these are to the local cultures. In Hungary, for example, this unicum liqueur is the subject of some very whimsical, nostalgic kind of Guinness-style ads that people really love. And if you're a teetotaler, there's also a world of interesting soft drinks to try in Europe. For example, in Switzerland, they have a unique soft drink that I've never had anywhere else called Rivella. And this is literally made with milk serum. And it tastes kind of like chewable vitamins. It sounds odd, but it's a very distinctive flavor. And I don't feel like I've been in Switzerland until I've had a bottle of Rivella. I actually liked it. I've developed a taste for it. Scotland, they have a bright orange sugary soda called Iron Brew. You know, it's fun to go beyond just the hard drinks and realize there's some interesting soft drinks as well. And the last aspect of drinking culture I'd like to talk about is this great cafe culture that Europe enjoys. In the United States, we've only recently sort of discovered the cafe culture of Europe through Starbucks and now through a variety of second and third wave coffee shops. But if you want to go back to the mothership, you're going to find that in Europe, especially Italy and France have a great cafe culture. And it's fun to go there and stow your preconceptions and your Starbucks menu order and really learn about the local coffee customs. The different drinks you can get in an Italian cafe, for example, it all has to do with how much espresso and how much milk they mix together and the way they mix it together. And they really think a lot about this. The other thing is, remember I talked earlier about how important digestion is to Italians. Italians, for example, believe that you should not have milk after about midday because it's really bad for your digestion. So if you go to a local Italian cafe in the mid-afternoon and ask for a cafe latte, they're going to say, no, we can't serve you a cafe latte. You don't want that much milk. They're worried about you. They're worried about your health. So you'll notice that Italians don't drink a lot of milk. Now, I'm sort of joking. They will serve it to you, but you actually might get kind of a funny look when you order it. Because of that, if you don't want to just take a straight espresso shot, Italians have an art of mixing in just a little dollop of cream, which they call un caffè macchiato. So it's a coffee that's marked with cream. Okay. By the way, a latte macchiato is the opposite. It's a big glass of milk that's marked with a little bit of espresso. This is where, when Starbucks popularized this form of drinking coffee, they kind of played fast and loose with some of the terminology. So you might want to study up if you're a coffee lover to make sure you get the right drink. A caffè macchiato in Italy is a little different than you get at Starbucks. If you go into an Italian cafe and you say, I'd like a latte, they're going to give you a glass of steamed milk. If you want a latte like we think of a latte, it's a caffè latte. It's coffee with milk. The other thing that you should be aware of, especially in Mediterranean countries, in France and Spain and Italy, you might pay different prices depending on where you have your coffee. You'll pay the most if you sit outside on the terrace. You'll pay a little bit less if you sit inside. But if you really want to save money, you can get your coffee standing at a counter. In fact, there's a law in Italy that says that every cafe in Italy can only charge about €1 for a basic espresso shot standing at the counter. This is a sort of a egalitarian law that makes sure that the average people aren't priced out of their coffee. And I've actually tried this. I've gone to the fanciest cafe in Venice where it's €15 for a coffee out on the square. And I walk up to the counter, and for €1, they give me the exact same coffee. Beyond the France, Italy kind of Starbucks-style coffee scene, other parts of Europe have also really great coffee scenes. Budapest and Hungary and Vienna and Austria have some really exciting, beautiful grand cafes. Portugal has a great kiosk culture, where in these beautiful shady squares all over Lisbon, you'll see little kiosks that serve drinks and coffees. And one of my favorite coffee scenes is actually in Bosnia. This is where they have what some people call Turkish coffee. Bosnians call it Bosnian coffee. And it's the sort of unfiltered coffee that is very time-consuming and exacting to prepare. And actually, Bosnians explained to me, we're not trying to caffeinate quickly. We do not like the Italian coffee culture where you walk up to a counter and you slam down an espresso and you get out the door. If we're having coffee, it's because we really want to slow down and connect with the people we're having coffee with. They like the fact that it takes longer to make Bosnian coffee because it gives an opportunity to connect with their friends. So it's interesting to get these insights as you travel around. And what talk about European food would be complete without a quick tour through the sweets of Europe. There's lots of great opportunities to finish a meal in Europe. Many countries are known for their candies, especially their chocolates. Belgium, of course, has its delicate pralines. Swiss chocolate is very famous for its creamy, milky qualities. But there are lots of other interesting candies you can seek out in your travels. And again, be adventurous. If you're in Scandinavian countries, go ahead, give salted licorice a try. If you don't like licorice, don't try it. But if you like licorice, you're going to love salted licorice. That's one of my favorite treats when I'm in Scandinavia. If you like salted caramel, why wouldn't you like salted licorice, right? But be adventurous. Seek out these interesting flavors and be willing to give them a try. Of course, there's a whole world of traditional pastries and croissants and this sort of thing. But I like to figure out what the local pastry is in each place. In Portugal, for example, they have a really beautiful cream custard tart called a pastel de nata. And there are some shops in Lisbon where you can actually go and watch them making this custard tart. And it's a really delicious way to learn about this. In Hungary and lots of parts of Eastern Europe, they have a dessert called a kurtos kalács, which is literally a chimney cake, where they wrap dough around a little spindle and they slowly run it over a rotisserie on hot coals, and it picks up some really delicious flavors, and it kind of caramelizes the sugar. It's really delicious. In Spain, of course, you have to get some churros con chocolate served with a thick pudding-like hot chocolate, and so forth. As you travel around Europe, you'll realize there's actually sort of a cultural divide as you go towards southeastern Europe. Most of Europe sweetens its desserts with sugar, but as you get into southeastern Europe, the Balkans, especially into Turkey and Greece, they sweeten things with honey. So there's kind of a cultural fault line that you discover you're crossing as you go over. And if you want some completely different, beautiful, sweet flavors, you can go to southeastern Europe. And of course, we have to talk about ice cream, which exists in every culture in Europe. And of course, for a lot of people, Italian gelato is the ultimate ice cream experience. I actually walked through Florence with a very good friend of mine once who has a friend who opened a gelato shop. And I asked her to teach me how to find the best gelato. So let me give you some of her tips. She said, first of all, keywords are things like artigianale, which means artisanal. You want to look for homemade. You don't want somebody who's just pouring packaged powders into their machines. You want somebody who's actually making it fresh every day. It's a really bad sign when you see big, colorful mountains of gelato that are piled above the containers. These are literally designed to mesmerize little kids. So they go over and say, I want that one because it's got the flashiest colors. She said the best thing to look for are natural, muted, sort of subdued colors. And my last tip from her that I thought was really interesting, if you want to be able to judge the quality of a gelato place, you try their pistachio flavor. The reason is every gelato costs the same, but some of the gelatos cost more to produce. And pistachio, if it's real pistachio, is the most expensive gelato to produce. So if someone runs a gelateria and they're trying to do it on the cheap, they're going to use basically an almond flavored gelato and add in a little bit of pistachio and some green food coloring and call it pistachio. But if you lick that pistachio flavor and you can really taste real pistachios, you know that this gelato place is not going to cheap out on their flavors.